Thank you for joining us today on Louder Than Green. Today we have a very exciting guest, and if you're building anything sustainable, regenerative, or just smarter than the status quo, you're in the right place. For those of you just joining the podcast, we are Green That Dream, and we specialize in helping businesses not just go green, but flourish. We focus on strategies that support people, planet, and profits by improving operations and managing resources. So if you're ready to take your business to the next level, stick around. And if you want a free growth consultation, head over to greenthatdream.com or just DM the word growth. Now let's get into it.
AI operations are impacting the environment with all the servers and information, warehouses being built, and water quality issues, but also how we can use it. Because I thought, man, if we are going to be disconnected as humans, is the human observation of nature going to be not needed anymore? Because we've been doing quite a bit from satellites and all these things, but I don't think there'll ever be a substitute for really causal relationships. It's just too much diversity and site-specific interactions in an ecosystem. You always need the human mind and eyes to, and even the sense of smell and sight to get through that.
Larry, I am here today with our amazing guest, Larry Dominguez, also going by Larry. He is joining us today from beautiful state of Washington.
That's right, Olympia, Washington. Thank you.
He is the founder and principal ecologist of Ecoassets Environmental, where he brings over 30 years of experience in watershed science, regulatory compliance, and sustainable infrastructure consulting. Larry specializes in integrating ecological systems with engineered design, helping clients navigate complex permitting, restoration, and habitat planning challenges. He is also the founder of Ecologists Without Borders, which is a nonprofit delivering ecological expertise to communities around the world. With a career rooted in both fieldwork and systems thinking, Larry is passionate about practical solutions that protect ecosystems while serving human needs. Thank you for joining us, Larry.
Thank you.
So before we dig into operations of any sort, I want to get a quick sense of how your business came to life. What inspired you to start your business, and what was the gap that you were trying to fill?
A comment on your podcast, Louder Than Green, and it made me think about, well, what does green sound like? And that has evolved over time. At one time in the 60s and 70s, it was very loud verbally and media-wise. And so what now is the current sound that we need to have to be effective? As you're delving into good science and good information is where this generation of stewards are leading. And I think you're tracking really well with this kind of approach to really finding what is that right sound and how loud does it need to be in order to make these changes. So I recognize that. Beginning with career, and how do you start in environmental consulting? I had one of my old mentors say consulting is one of the two oldest careers in the world history. And consulting is one, and I said, well, what's the other one? And he said, well, I can't tell you, but it's illegal in Nevada. When you pay for information or pay for knowledge base, that's been going on since the dawn of time, and over time we've been able to correlate that to our areas of expertise. And so my involvement, as most biologists, ecologists start out early in their life. They love bugs, they love nature, they want to figure things out and understand it. They pull wings apart on flies, they cut things open to see what they look like inside. You feel bad about it later, but it created the curiosity. And then you come to a point in your career where you're either going to make a lot of money doing some other career, or you become a biologist or ecologist. And so for the people that forego the wealths of the world, but love the richness of life and understanding how things work and how systems work, you are fulfilled in all ways possible. And my career got involved up in the Pacific Northwest after leaving Los Angeles, Southern California, growing up in the concrete-lined rivers of the San Gabriel River, riding our bikes in dry river beds made of concrete. I decided to move north after high school to play college basketball and take biology up here. And I got one view of a Pacific salmon being pulled out of a river down in Oregon, the Wilson River, something like a 65-pound Chinook salmon. And I was so fascinated by that inner city boy going up to the great Northwest. I went over to that fisherman. I said, "What is that?" And I vowed that day that I would become so knowledgeable about the animal because it was so impressive how to be swimming up into this river. And I spent my life studying this animal, and it turned out to be a good choice. And I will give this idea to up and coming ecologists and biologists that are trying to decide on a career pathway. Throw this out there for a bit because it has helped me tremendously. So this particular animal, the salmon, travels this life through many ecosystems, the marine, rivers, forests, interurban, deep ocean, shorelines, estuaries, wetlands. So to become an expert with this particular animal, I had to know about its habitat. So it led me to needing to understand how all these systems work. So it seemed like overload of trying to be an expert in all of these, which I don't claim to be, but to have a deep knowledge of all these other parts of the world ecosystems has been a tremendous boost for me in the consulting realm because consulting is very diverse. You have to be able to wear a lot of different hats and speak toward different professions. And so it's served me well in this.
Nice. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So you've been doing this for a while. How has the focus of your business evolved over time?
So initially, I broke into consulting quite a few years ago, coming out of the regulatory agency. So I was a regulatory scientist looking at permits, helping with landscape planning and forest management. Washington State is one of the more complicated, complex regulatory environments because we have such a beautiful state. People complain about the rules and regulations, but it's one of the benefactors who live in this wonderful place with clean water and wildlife and fish and beautiful oceans. And so I had 2 stints with private consulting. The first guy said, "Hey, Larry, you're a good scientist. Can you come and work for a company?" I said, "I don't know about that. It just seems like I've heard about consulting and, you got to compromise." I was totally against that. But a quick story about how in 2 occasions that was done away with, that kind of thinking, because the principal of the company put me on an assignment on a very large national project. And the short story is that my findings of research was to the detriment of the project. It was going to have a negative effect on the fisheries, and it would probably create the project not to happen. And then it's a multi-million-dollar project, and he took it to his clients and said, "This is what our people are finding out." And they had asked him to change the wording a little bit. And so I said, "Why did you hire me?" He said, well, he didn't answer. I said, "You hired me to give you the good science, number one. And number two, I used to be a regulatory scientist, so I know exactly what they're going to need to hear about this. And this is what they say." And he said, "Okay." And it turns out that they ended up losing that multi-million-dollar client based on that. And I felt that, wow, I could be in this business of the environment and I could stick to my gut feeling of protection, of understanding the systems as much as possible. So it's not to say that we mitigate and do other things to help with the effects of things, but that made me feel good about it, getting that. Now, you talked about the origins of my company. My first stint, I was trying to raise a family of 5 kids and a stay-at-home mom who did homeschool, and it was rough because consulting is feast or famine, and the volatility and the time commitments for that led me to go back to government work, which, not to say you work any less, but it's a little bit more regulated and predictable. So, and then I just got the bug again for consulting because when I went back into the public sector, I noticed that a lot of the managers were sending their low performing workers to me to make them work harder. So they would punish them by giving the assignment to me by this former consultant coming in to show you really how we need to get things done. My big thinking and a little bit of the ADHD thrown in there, I wanted to do a lot of different things. So now that I had a first taste, I knew as I expected, I left the current company and I knew it was going to be successful because the clients were calling the company that I had worked for, and they asked me where I was, and they said, "He's not here anymore. How can we help you?" And they said, "No, we want to work with Larry." And so They graciously would have given me their contact. So it's telling me that the relationships with people that you have during any job and performance is key, and doing a good job for them will bring them back. So that was very promising that people would actually want you to work for them. So that has been encouraging. It's scaled up quite a bit. Me and my wife, we started it. She's a co-owner. We're a small business, a minority owned small business enterprise here in the state, and work with quite a bit of subcontractors, upwards of 10 to 12 different interdisciplinary scientists to portray as a large firm that is capable of doing some pretty complicated and large scale projects. And I want to grow this year. I can see that we can do more capacity when you find good people who are able to do the work. So now that I can delegate more to some great young ecologists, master's degree students, they can really run with this and be a part of it. So that's how it's growing organically.
That's great. It's nice when you're able to find that nice balance, right, of growth and not having to scrape by. So, what services do you guys offer today, and who is your ideal client?
There's three general areas of service that we have. One is the developmental sector, small landowners, developers who are trying to work within local regulations to build houses, improve properties, or develop properties, and amidst critical areas or sensitive natural resource areas. We do assessments and do reporting, wetland inventories, and also shoreline assessments for marine projects for them to allow. There are ways that you can understand an ecosystem's resilience and then allow these things to happen within that through sustainable practices or mitigative factors that could even improve in some cases. That one area is the developmental side. The second area is the assisting engineering companies. With my forte in aquatic ecology and salmon ecology, there's a big movement in river restoration in this region. And my understanding of salmon life history and what the topic is fluvial geomorphology, that's the way that rivers shape the terrain over time. With the understanding of that, I help engineering companies maximize the ecological benefits of projects that they want to build for habitat restoration. I provide advice on their designs and also help them to be competitive in bids for competitive projects, because in the region I've been around, I'm a kind of a known entity for this type of work in salmonid ecology. So I can help bolster their teams. So we've got small landowners development, habitat elements is another one. And the third one is everything else. That would predominantly be as needed for people who have environmental questions about either on the international level or nationally for floodplain mitigation, hazard analysis in coastal areas. We work quite a bit with companies that do shoreline protection. Now, the Puget Sound is a very sensitive ecosystem, and there's not a lot that is allowed under the regulations right now. The thinking that I have for improving habitats along with their projects to protect their shorelines is sought after by quite a few people, and there's a lot of companies that do that kind of work as well, and there's a lot of good people that do that work. So those are kind of the three elements.
Nice. It sounds like you are getting a lot of business from word of mouth. Is that the case, or are you people finding you through other means?
Yeah, there's a few avenues. Some are kind of ongoing. That is the way the counties and the agencies are set up is they have rosters that you pre-qualify with your credential. You send in your statement of qualifications, and then they show their clientele who's available, who's out there that does that type of work that will be acceptable to us. And so that's a marketing element that you do maybe once every 2 years to different counties. Word of mouth is big because I get quite a bit of calls without reaching out to anybody. And we do have a website, ecoassets.us. It just went through a recent revamp. So I encourage anybody to go read about us, how a small company can do big time work with the right kind of people. We like the imagery there and kind of the excitement we have of helping people solve their problems and their troubles. So that's what we like to do.
Nice. Can you tell me just a little bit more about your team? Who's involved with most of the work that you do?
Yeah, I won't necessarily give any names, but to protect the innocent or the guilty. So we have an array of folks that are varying years of experience, some well-seasoned veterans in policy and landscape planning and conservation from the federal services, wetland scientists, We have a marine ecologist that is also a statistician and she knows code and computer, which is this was intriguing to me. She's a marine scientist and she also knows computer coding. And I'm like, wow, this is a new generation of ecologists, you know. And
Right?
so with AI and all these things, how do you make sense of new information and massive amounts of information and still be viable? That was my main question as in the last few years of AI development in the sciences. And let it be known, you know, AI has been around since the dawn of man, but we just have new tools. So it's nothing to be shocked about. It's just how do you react to what's available to use. We have also some international folks involved in conservation that I kind of always got my feelers out. I love international work. I do have a lady in Sri Lanka and also in Amsterdam and a couple of floaters that do seasonal work around the world that we look out for grant opportunities and we can get behind them to support their work. And we have a conservation biologist who has done bird research, but since she's come on board, I've taught her how to do wetland science and coastal sciences. So you get kind of a big breadth of disciplines, even though you bring in a specialty, which makes for a good fit for everybody.
That's great. That's really cool that you have an international vision because there's a lot of tools and things that people are using in different parts of the world that could be beneficial to others.
Yes, and part of that is I don't want to conflict with the nonprofit I founded because they also are.
Right.
Whenever I'm thinking internationally, I'm thinking of it. Will that work for them? Is it a project I can develop for the nonprofit? Because I love getting more people involved at that realm with opportunities. But there's certain things that I've come to know that I know will never get off the ground if you go through NGO sector and compete for grants. It's just too hard with communication. Then I might get the consultants from overseas to kind of do some homework on a project. But definitely, yes, the nonprofit is the priority in any kind of international outreach right now.
Right, right. That's exciting. So let's talk a little bit about tools and structure because I think most people don't really realize how much consulting requires behind the scenes work. I think a lot of people think, oh, you get to go out and do field work and and that's the fun part. I mean, I remember those days. The field work was definitely the fun part and not the paperwork. You've been doing this for a little while and you've talked a little bit about AI and other tools, but what are some of the essential tools that you are currently using, whether that's for project tracking or compliance, and a little bit of that evolution?
Yes, yes. Speaking to your point on the exciting part of it, the environmental consulting part of it, well, the other side is just what you're talking about. I call it environmental consoling. That's when you come back to the office and you're wishing you were back out in the field, but you got to put out a report. You got to do the math. You got to put all that together. So we have the standard products of environmental work, which is ArcGIS Pro. I would encourage small businesses that sometimes it's hard to support a full-time GIS person because it's such a specialty. There is the quick learn from QGIS, which is the free online source that people can get up to speed on as compatible with GIS. And plus, it's really expensive software. But we have a relationship with the local college nearby, and they have a graduate school program for GIS. And I got to know the professor there, and I asked him to send me his top people of the quarter that look like they can want an internship. So I have a good relationship, and they're doing some really solid work for me, being compensated for that as well. And so that's how I fit that bill there to stay robust in the GIS point of view. And I'm a personal operator too. I've been using that since it came out in the like 80s or early 90s under Unix commands. Some of the listeners might know the Unix prompting and the markers and the pens. So yeah, early 90s. So I tried to stick with that for myself as well. So we have now with AI, I'll recommend a particular kind of suite of AI because where I think this is going, and I knew it's always going to be an issue. I started a LinkedIn group called Environment and AI. And so maybe I'll send a link to folks to get that. It's to kind of keep pushing forward how AI's effect on the environment. And there's two elements of that. One is how AI operations are impacting the environment with all the servers and information, warehouses being built and water quality issues, but also how we can use it. Because I thought, man, if we we're going to be disconnected as humans? Is the human observation of nature going to be not needed anymore? Because we've been doing quite a bit from satellites and all these things. But I don't think there'll ever be a substitute for really causal relationships. There's just too much diversity and site-specific interactions in the ecosystem that you always need the human mind and eyes to, and even the sense of smell and sight to get through that. So this one tool is called Abacus, and it's a subscription where I think most AI applications are heading. They're trying to cluster and group. So a lot of these early strong independent ones are going to be kind of clustered together and replace Microsoft Suite and all these things. So we'll use spreadsheets for information, a lot of mapping and reporting and templates that we use through that. We're starting to develop. So that's I have a little field gear involved too. We have a boat, small boat for aquatic resources and fishing nets. We also will remove fish from areas where they're doing project work for protection and measuring flows. So we have hydrology equipment if people want to know, what the flows of a river are or where they might be connected across the landscape. So yeah, just it's a good balance between just the paperwork, computer work, and the field work.
Sounds like you've embraced a lot of the newer tools and embracing AI. Is that helping in your business? Is that helping with operations or efficiencies?
It's definitely saving time. So in our profession, time is money. When you bill in a not to exceed amount, you can make
Yeah.
projects more profitable. What the temptation is, and I have to avoid as a consultant, is just like an application, for example, ArcGIS has a lot of hydrology tools, and you could make a nice map and talk about flows, but if you don't really have a core understanding as a hydraulic engineer or a hydrologist would, I wouldn't want to speak to that. Like you could make maps of agency maps that say these slopes are unstable or in this and that, but you still need to be trained, and that's a liability for us as consultants is we don't speak outside of our boundaries. We could recognize the information, and it's okay to do that. Include the caveats, and there is there's nobody that knows everything, and so we have to yield to that. And part of my agreement with clients is I'll give you as best answer as I could, but if I feel that you need to know more, I'll refer you to my geotechnical engineer that I know could give you more confidence in this. So don't have any problem doing that.
That's great. I agree with you. There's science, it takes that human element. I don't think that will be replaced with being able to really use all the senses to analyze something.
Yeah, the only way that is to be replaced is if we don't care anymore. And I think there's going to always be people like you and me that care. We're thinking of the future people, but more and more the people don't care. And that's who's the majority or the minority. I think every human being wants clean water. Every human being wants to breathe clean air. So in a way, there always is going to be from the human nature the desire to have a healthy environment. It's kind of in us to live healthy.
I agree. I would like to believe that there remains true to the human nature of people. I like to reiterate that because, like you said, the richness in life is doing those things that you hold true to your heart, and that's what wealth is.
There's a saying that says I once knew a man so poor that all he had was money. Yeah, that's all he had. So what? So where's your wealth?
Where's your wealth? It's so great to talk with people like you that have such passion and desire to help.
There's this little book by Hillary Augustine. She's on LinkedIn, Hillary Augustine, and it's called The Currency Paradigm. I'm gonna give her a little plug here. She'll love me for it. But it opened me up to this idea of what are the currencies in your life? Time, space, money, and one other one I forget. But I got back to her and I said, well, what about people? I said, how is that a currency? So after reading that book, and it didn't have people in there, but you could probably read people into it some way or another. But I said, why don't you write a follow-up book on the people paradigm? And I said, I'm going to be a millionaire. And I said, but you know what? I'm gonna have an impact on 1 million people. So I had this idea of people are my currency now, and I want to affect millions, if not multi-millions. And that's why I become a millionaire. is to have a positive effect. Yeah,
I love that. You need to make a bumper sticker out of that.
I do.
That's your tagline.
Yeah, the people. Yeah, I'm a millionaire.
People are my currency.
I think you'll be happy with how things would work out.
I agree. So, back to, your business and everything. It sounds like things are moving along well, but are you finding any friction or inefficiencies that you're dealing with?
Friction and inefficiencies. When you get on a roll on like a lot of like reports, there's a couple of different business models or business, I want to say revenue streams in my kind of business. The small little projects, $3, $4, $5,000 ones that a landowner calls, you consult the report, help him get his permit or buildings and things. And then there's the big, 50, 70, $120,000 ones, year long or 2 years long. You're a subcontractor, you're at the mercy of contractors. And so the friction sometimes is as a subcontractor, you're like at the bottom of the food chain there, because unless you've made some agreements, changing budgets, a lot of times there's no guarantees. And so you try to plan out these big long-term projects, and it's taking way longer than you expect. And then the time pressure, and sometimes to control the schedule and budgets, the prime contractors might squeeze you to say, hey, you can't get started yet. Just last year, I was on a subcontractor team, and 2 years had gone by, and they were almost done with the project, and I was supposed to be in charge of all the permitting and the evaluation. They did it all in-house, so that wasn't very good. I wasn't very happy when I found out that they were using my company to win the project. I did a little bit of coaching for their junior staff, a little bit of coaching, but nothing of the element that was said. So that's friction, and that's business. That's business. You just find out who your partners are, good or bad. And the other one is the other friction at this time in my life is time, which is for everybody. I should probably be entering into retirement, which people say. I tell my wife I'm on the horizontal retirement plan. When I'm done, I'm done. So the friction is assuring income and getting the right partners in this, especially private business.
Good, good. So let's zoom into your role as a consultant, especially working across multiple disciplines. What challenges do you find dealing with a lot of different people, different agencies, engineers, and clients all at once? What are your biggest challenges around that?
So the biggest challenge is putting myself in their position, why they're asking and what they need. I don't say that's like a negative challenge. That's like the self challenge of how you go about your business. So you don't try to be somebody you're not. I don't have a lot of negative challenges because there's some just really good companies I work with and solid people that believe in what we're doing. And when you have teams like that, I really can't say the challenges still come from the regulatory side, though. And so this is a good question. I'll re-answer your question with that now on the regulatory side. And that's because as a consultant, a lot of the rules say that you have to have an expert to make a determination that there's like no unstable slope that they want to put this structure on. And you go out there and it's completely flat. Okay. You go out to that site and a very low risk. They wouldn't have you do that, but something that's just totally obvious that you and our grandpa could go out and say, yeah, we can build a house right there and have nothing happen to it. But they want the landowner to spend $5,000 or $6,000 for a geotechnical report. And all of a sudden it's almost half the cost of what they want to build a little shed or something. What I try to do sometimes is make a determination outside of that expertise, but I give a disclaimer. I say, look, I'm not recognizing myself as a geotechnical or a licensed engineer, but on my observations and in my experience, so I use my credential working with forest lands and working with other geologists to see if they would not, I try to saving the landowner money, not to be a cheapskate on his analysis, but just sympathetic to them wanting to do the right thing, because many of them have these beautiful lands and they want to preserve it. They want to do what's right. This is why they're calling you. And so the rub sometimes is the personalities within the agencies. Some of them are very inexperienced, and they have to check the box of the regulation. So, and sometimes they just are not outcome based; they're more just covering themselves. And I understand that as well because I operated on that side, and they have an obligation through federal law or state law to ask these questions and to have these products. So I try to bridge that sometimes for people. So that's a challenge. That would be I would say one of the challenges is trying to give a reasonable cost for these people, and being sympathetic to them, and but also sympathetic to the requirements of the agency.
Right. It's kind of like that balancing act between the regulation and reality.
Yes, correct.
Right? We don't need to over engineer, over complicate a
And a
situation.
regulation, the law is made to cover the majority of a normal distribution, and you're always going to have the outliers.
Yep, you're going to have unique situations. So let's talk a little bit about growth. You mentioned that you are growing the business. So if you had more time, support, or budget, what part of the business would you grow or streamline first?
I would streamline my marketing or grow my marketing because we have capacity right now. It's just so competitive when you have these major companies that have 5 or 6 staff people strictly devoted to putting proposals together or marketing. I have to do all that, website and proposals. The buck stops here. So I would love to have a marketing person and put budgets towards that. That would be awesome.
Nice.
We
Have
haven't.
you ever had that in your business?
I have had that done piecemeal, but not very much. One of the ways that we will grow that area is we've brought a particular lady from Texas on board who is into the AI and regenerative AI and also UX, user experience, portraying information graphically, UX, they call that, and communications. And so I do plan to put some effort into how we could present ourselves as being the planners as well. So we could bring the science and ecology and then to work with cities to plan that out. So now what? Let's work on your long-term shoreline plan, your landscape management plan. So to try to cover those all in-house. Yeah, and when you get to that level, there's a lot of big companies that do that. So we're going to have to somehow, our market business would show value, that you're not just getting your principal or the manager is not just overhead, he's actually doing the work. And that's where small businesses can be competitive. When you have the owners and the principals and the senior scientists actually the ones going to do the work, not sending out their junior people, then people feel better about that. They're getting a good value.
Absolutely. So what does the next chapter look like for you and your business? Is it more partnerships, expanding services, deeper impact?
That's good. Well, that's a good question. I thank you for that. My wife always asks me that too. What are you doing? Don't you have a goal in life? Don't you want to do something? I never figured that out. But putting that to the business design, you're hearing more and more about how people are successful, the LinkedIn posts and everything. I became successful by being excellent at one thing. They're doing one thing, they're being like the best, the most influential, the most followers, the most. So it doesn't take me hard not to worry about that stuff because I don't worry about that too much. But because I always wonder, if you're doing one thing, how fun is that? How fun is doing the same thing over and over and over? So I think what's going to happen in my growth, which would match my spirit and intent, is to bring in partners that are doing different things and enhance them rather than me enhance myself. And so that would mean engineering companies, river engineering companies, infrastructure, that I could help their team and give them a different perspective on things for that. So that's where I think my growth comes from, because I cannot pursue those. These are multi-million and billion-dollar projects. I'm not a prime candidate to lead those projects. So number one, just expertise and capacity, um, but I can make your team better, is what I say. So I think that's where I think my growth is going to come from.
Nice. That sounds great. I mean, I agree with you too, doing the one thing. I consider myself a Renaissance soul and like doing one thing, but I gotta diversify. It's way more fun. I think so too, Larry. So this might be kind of a random question, but I'm just curious if it's something you've thought about. Do you have an exit strategy for your business?
Yes and no. What a great consultant answer. I turn to yes and no because it makes you think like there is an actual answer and I'm going to give it to you. That's my little trick. I've had a couple of companies call me about purchasing because of my niche. But when we get down into the weeds, I can't show myself with tremendous amount of capacity because I'm too small. Even though our products and our things show a tremendous amount of capacity, when it comes down to human beings, that's not what they're looking for these large companies when they purchase another company. So that hasn't worked out. So my goal is to bring on a couple of people that share the same vision, like doing the same kind of work, and eventually turning it over to them. Seeing a tremendous amount of proposal opportunities come out. So something's really ticking with the economy for people to be spending money, to be building things that have been on hold for a lot of years. So I'm going to see how that plays out and how we could use that towards our growth. What the building improvement, building economy and development economy is doing. There's a lot to it for what they call owner shares, like your employee owned businesses and all these things to look at. But here you go, AI. I did an AI thing and I said, hey, I'm a small business developing. Give me an exit strategy for my business. I just did that a few days ago. So some of these things came up, all the things to consider.
That's great. At least you're thinking about it, and
Yeah.
that's good because a lot of times people don't think about it, and it takes planning. It takes time to get to that point unless you want to just dissolve it, which would be kind of sad to dissolve something you built so long to.
Well, so when I'm traveling a little bit now, because I'm kind of straddling this travel later years kind of thing, and maybe probably working 25% of my time, 25% to 30%, and that's enough to like equate and exceed any salary I've ever made in my career by consulting. But what happens when I travel overseas? I see potential international projects like I was in Mexico and there's this beach that nobody was using because it was high energy. So I had this idea about an offshore reef, and I went in there to talk to the Mexican government. They said, "Hey, it's a great idea," and so we're going to see where that goes. So just always thinking when I'm traveling around, and then and so yeah, to be able to say that and know that I have a company that can actually do something about it rather than just have the idea. That's what I like, that you can actually do something about
Right. I mean, you're a visionary and an integrator. So we'll wrap up here in a little bit. I have just a couple more questions. You've seen a lot over the years, and I want to close with a little bit of reflection. What's one lesson that you've learned about keeping a consulting business both mission aligned and operationally sustainable?
mission line operation. My mind immediately went to mentorship, mentoring. Okay, so I've had some great mentors in my career. They were all in the regulatory agency side, but just good scientists to tell me that, and I picked up so many things about from them and also from the private sector that it's so important to pour into other people. So, in regarding sustainability, and see if I'm speaking into even my subconsultants or some staff about how to make them better. And I've even resigned myself. I says, look, when you're working for me, you're gonna learn so much more than you've ever learned in college, and I'm gonna give you 30 years worth of experience in probably about 2 years. Everything I'm just gonna download it into you. And I tell them, if you decide that you want to leave and start your own company, that's fine, because I want you to be the best while you're working for me. And so that is what I've kind of resolved, and not to worry about them leaving and feeling equipped. That's just the way it is, because they're only going to be as good for my company as I am good to them, and then and knowledgeable about that. So yeah, the mentorship, I think it's got to be up there, number one and two, with the relationships.
That's awesome. I agree. Mentorships are crucial. Both having mentees and being a mentor is a beautiful thing. So, Larry, where can people connect with you and learn more about your work, either with the Ecoassets or the Ecologists Without Borders?
Yes, they can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, Lawrence Dominguez, or visit my website, ecoassets.us. And through there is my phone number as well, an email that can be contacted through there. Ecologists Without Borders is an international organization. It's ECOWB. There's currently a tremendous board and staff working there. I'm not on board right now. I'm just part of kind of the legacy leadership there, passing the torch to some incredible upcoming scientists, ecologists from all over the world. And you could register as an ecological service provider and develop projects wherever you like, and maybe there's opportunities to come alongside and assist in grant writing for you, things like that, if you have ideas overseas. But Ecoassets is the business. I like to talk to people about their small business. I like to talk to people in the region that would be interested in partnering on large projects where I might be able to provide some pretty solid analytical and technical side of things for the Washington and Oregon. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you very much again, Larry, for joining us today on Louder Than Green. We really appreciate having you, and this was a very inspiring conversation.
Okay, Aimee, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Louder Than Green. Every guest we feature and every story we share is a reminder that sustainable business is not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. I'm incredibly grateful for this community, for everyone building differently, leading with integrity, and turning up the volume on what matters most. You can find more episodes and join the conversation at www.greenthatdream.com. And remember, regeneration is a practice. Make yours heard.